The night my family handed my 20-year-old restaurant to my sister because she was more photogenic, I smiled, took off my apron, and walked out with nothing but my knives. 2 months later, the restaurant was bankrupt. And the strangest part? I didn't sabotage it. I didn't steal a recipe. I didn't call a single customer. I simply stopped holding the entire thing together. If you've ever been the person doing all the work while someone else gets the praise, you already know what happened next. But you probably don't know how long I had been waiting for the moment when I could finally let go. My name is Hannah Miller, and for 20 years, I belonged to a restaurant that never technically belonged to me. That sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. 20 years. I was 15 when my father first put a chef's knife in my hand. The restaurant was called Miller's Table. It sat on a narrow corner between a florist and an old bookstore, in a brick building that had been there longer than anyone in our family could remember. The sign above the entrance was dark green with gold lettering, Miller's Table. Underneath it, in smaller letters, family, food, tradition. My father loved that sign. He used to stand outside after closing, hands on his hips, looking up at it like he'd built a cathedral. Maybe, in his mind, he had. Miller's Table had started as a 12-table neighborhood restaurant. By the time I was 25, people drove 2 hours just to eat there. By 30, food magazines had written about us. Reservations on Friday and Saturday nights could be impossible to get. We had customers who celebrated anniversaries at the same table every year. People who brought their children, then watched those children grow up and bring dates. One couple even named their daughter after one of our desserts. And everyone thought my father had built it. That wasn't exactly true. My father had built the restaurant. I had built the food. There was a difference. When I was 15, I started helping in the kitchen because my mother said I needed to learn responsibility. My sister Chloe was 13. Chloe hated the kitchen. She hated the smell of onions. She hated flour getting under her fingernails. She hated standing over a hot stove. Whenever Dad asked her to help, she'd disappear into the dining room and start chatting with customers. She was beautiful. There was no denying it. Chloe had long blonde hair, bright green eyes, perfect teeth, and the kind of smile that made strangers immediately like her. She could walk into a room and somehow make everyone look at her. I was different. I was quiet. I liked listening more than talking. I had dark brown hair that I usually tied back, permanently tired eyes, and hands that always smelled faintly of garlic, rosemary, or smoke. I wasn't glamorous. I was useful. And for most of my life, I thought those were the same thing. They weren't. My father taught me the basics: knife work, stocks, sauces, temperatures, timing. But the restaurant became my education. I learned from every mistake. I learned that a sauce could be technically perfect and still feel dead. I learned that a roast needed rest. I learned that people remembered texture longer than presentation. I learned that you could change a recipe by half a teaspoon and suddenly make it unforgettable. Most importantly, I learned what our customers wanted before they knew how to ask for it. Our signature dish was a braised short rib with a coffee cherry reduction. It wasn't my father's recipe. It was mine. I created it at 19. The first version was terrible, too bitter, then too sweet, then too heavy. I spent 3 weeks adjusting it. One night after closing, I put a plate in front of Dad. He took one bite. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me. Then he took another bite. "Hannah," he said quietly, "that's the dish." That sentence stayed with me for years. That's the dish. I believed he meant, that's your future. Instead, he apparently meant, that's useful. As the years passed, I became the invisible engine behind Miller's Table. I created the seasonal menus. I trained the cooks. I negotiated with suppliers. I tested ingredients. I fixed broken equipment. I handled kitchen scheduling. I stayed until 2 in the morning when the walk-in refrigerator failed. I learned which farmers could be trusted. I knew exactly how much butter we went through every week. I knew which customer couldn't eat walnuts. I knew which waiter had a daughter applying to college. I knew which dishwasher's mother was sick. I knew the restaurant, every inch of it. The squeaky third floorboard near the pantry, the loose hinge on the freezer door, the exact sound the hood ventilation made when it needed servicing. I knew what the kitchen smelled like at 5:17 in the morning when the first stock pot went on. I knew what it sounded like at 10:45 at night when the last customer left. I knew it so well that sometimes I could close my eyes and still walk through it. And for a long time, I didn't resent that. Because it was family. That word excuses a lot. Family. It makes unpaid overtime feel like love. It makes disrespect feel like sacrifice. It makes being overlooked feel noble. I thought I was helping build something that would eventually be mine. That assumption was my first mistake. The second was believing my father saw me the way I saw myself. When I turned 32, Dad began talking about retirement. He was 64. His knees hurt. His hands shook slightly when he lifted heavy pans. He wanted to travel. He wanted to spend time with Mom. And I understood. More than anyone, I understood. One night after service, we sat in the empty dining room. The chairs were upside down on the tables. The candles had been extinguished. There were still crumbs on the floor. Dad poured himself a glass of wine. "You know what I'd like?" he asked. "What?" "To know this place is safe." I looked at him. "It is." He smiled. "I mean after me." I knew what he meant. "You want me to take over?" He looked away for a second. Then he nodded. "Who else?" My chest tightened. I remember staring at the candle wax on the table. "Are you serious?" "Hannah, you've practically been running this place for 10 years. Practically. That word would come back to haunt me, but at the time, I didn't notice. I smiled. I actually smiled like an idiot. "I won't let you down." Dad raised his glass. "I know." I went home that night unable to sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. I imagined my name on the paperwork. Hannah Miller, owner. I imagined hiring my own staff, creating my own menu, renovating the kitchen, keeping the things that worked, changing the things that didn't. I imagined my father finally stepping away knowing the restaurant was in capable hands. For the first time, I allowed myself to think, this could really be mine. Then Chloe came back. She had been living in Miami for 3 years. She worked in fashion marketing. At least, that's what we told people. The reality was that she'd changed jobs 6 times. She had a large social media following, about 180,000 followers, travel pictures, restaurants, fashion, brunch, selfies. She knew how to make a glass of champagne look like an event. When she came home, she brought that energy with her. She walked into Miller's table one Friday evening wearing a cream blazer and heels. She took a picture in front of the sign. Within an hour, she had hundreds of comments. "Girl, you belong here. Are you taking over? This restaurant is about to blow up." Chloe laughed when she showed me. "People are funny." I smiled. "Very." Then she looked at the dining room. "You know what this place needs?" I was plating appetizers. "What?" "More personality." I looked around. "It's a restaurant." She laughed. "No, Hannah, it's a brand. I remember wiping my hands on my apron. It's been here 20 years. "Exactly." She picked up one of our menus. 20 years is old. I stared at her. "People love it." "People love nostalgia, that's not the same thing." I wanted to argue. Instead, I went back to the kitchen. I didn't know it yet, But that conversation was the first crack in the foundation. Over the next 6 months, Chloe became increasingly involved. At first, I welcomed it. Dad had always said Chloe could help with marketing. Fine. We needed better social media. Fine. She suggested we start filming behind-the-scenes videos. Fine. She convinced Dad to redesign the website. Fine. She brought in a photographer. Fine. Then one afternoon, I walked into the dining room and saw a man taking photographs of Chloe beside the entrance. She was holding one of our signature plates. My plate. The coffee cherry short rib. "Can you move the plate closer to her?" the photographer asked. Chloe smiled. I stood there. Nobody noticed me. The photographer took several pictures. Then Chloe tasted the food. "Wow," she said. The photographer laughed. "Is it good?" "It's amazing." I almost said, "I know. I created it." Instead, I walked away. That night, Chloe posted the photograph. Caption: "Bringing my family's 20-year-old legacy into the future. So excited for what's coming." Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, and one sentence that made my stomach turn. "Can't wait to see what you do with the menu." What you do, not what Hannah does, what Chloe does. I closed my phone. I told myself it didn't matter. Social media wasn't reality. The food was reality. The kitchen was reality. Customers knew. My staff knew. Dad knew. Didn't he? Then, 3 months later, Dad called a family meeting. Mom was there. Chloe was there. I was there. Dad sat at the head of the dining table. He had a folder in front of him. My heart started beating faster. I thought, this is it. He cleared his throat. "I've made a decision about the future of Miller's Table." Chloe looked at me. She smiled. Not nervously, confidently. That should have been my warning. Dad opened the folder. "Chloe will be taking over as managing owner." I actually laughed. It was involuntary. A small, confused sound. Then I looked at Dad. He wasn't laughing. "I'm sorry," I said. He shifted in his chair. "Hannah." "No, I'm just confused." Chloe reached across the table. "Hannah, don't make this weird." I stared at her. "What?" She sighed. "You know you're incredible in the kitchen." That sentence landed like a slap. "You're saying I'm good at cooking." "I'm saying you're an amazing chef." "And she's taking over the restaurant?" Dad interrupted. "Chloe has the business instincts we need now." I looked at him. "Business instincts?" He nodded. "She understands branding, marketing, public relations." I swallowed. "I built the menu." "I know." "I trained the entire kitchen." "I know." "I negotiated every major supplier contract." "I know." "I've been here every day for 20 years. Dad's eyes softened. "I know, Hannah." "Then why her?" Silence. Chloe looked down at her nails. Mom finally spoke. "Honey, don't take this personally." I almost laughed again. How could I possibly take it personally? My father had just handed my life's work to my sister because she knew how to pose in front of a camera. But Dad still hadn't said the worst part. He closed the folder. "People connect with Chloe." I stared at him. "She has a presence." My throat tightened. "What does that have to do with running a restaurant?" Dad hesitated. Then he said it. The sentence that ended our relationship. "She photographs better than you." Nobody spoke. For several seconds, I genuinely couldn't process what I'd heard. Then I looked at Chloe. She looked embarrassed. But not surprised. That hurt more. Because she knew. She had known. This wasn't a decision made that afternoon. It had already been discussed. Planned. Finalized. Without me. I looked at Dad. "So that's it?" He nodded. "It's about the future." "No." I stood up. "It's about appearance." "Hannah, you didn't choose the person who built the restaurant." Dad's expression hardened. "Don't make this about resentment." I felt something inside me go completely still. I'm not making it about anything. I took off my napkin, folded it, placed it on the table. Then I said, "Congratulations, Chloe." She looked up. "Hannah." "No." I picked up my bag. "You wanted the restaurant." I looked at Dad. "Now you have to run it without me." Dad's face changed. Just slightly. Because I think for the first time he realized what that actually meant. I walked toward the door. "Hannah, wait." I stopped. Dad's voice was quieter. "Don't do something you'll regret." I turned around. I already regret staying this long. Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply went home. And at 2:13 in the morning, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I opened my laptop. I stared at the blank screen. Then I opened a new document and typed 3 words. "What is mine?" That was the night everything changed. Because I wasn't planning revenge yet, I was planning an exit. And I had no idea how powerful that distinction would become. The first week after I left Miller's table was harder than I expected. Not because I missed my family. I did. But that wasn't the hardest part. I missed the kitchen. That surprised me. I missed the noise, the burners, the knives hitting cutting boards, the hiss of oil, the shouted orders. "Two salmon! Pick up! Behind! Heard!" I missed the rhythm. There is a strange intimacy in a professional kitchen. You spend 10 hours beside the same people. You sweat together, burn yourself together, get yelled at together, celebrate together. When service goes perfectly, everyone feels it. When it collapses, everyone feels that too. Miller's table wasn't just a restaurant. It was a language I'd spoken for 20 years. Suddenly, I was silent. I slept badly. I'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning convinced I'd forgotten to order something. Then I'd remember. I didn't work there anymore. The first morning, I actually drove halfway to the restaurant before realizing where I was going. I pulled over, sat in the car, and laughed. Then I cried. Not dramatically. Just tears rolling down my face while the heater blew warm air against my hands. I kept thinking, they don't need me. That was the lie I had to learn to believe, because everyone else seemed determined to reinforce it. 2 days after I left, Chloe posted a video. She was standing in the kitchen, my kitchen, wearing a crisp white chef's jacket. The caption said, "Stepping into the next chapter of Miller's Table." I watched it 3 times. She talked about modernizing the culinary vision. She talked about fresh ideas. She talked about bringing the restaurant into a new era. Then she held up the menu. My menu. She hadn't changed it. Not one dish. I stared at the screen. That was when I realized something. She didn't know how to replace me. She only knew how to replace my name. For the next month, I stayed away. I didn't call employees. I didn't contact suppliers. I didn't speak to customers. I didn't post anything. I didn't want anyone accusing me of sabotage. I wanted clean hands, completely clean. Meanwhile, Miller's table began changing. The first thing Chloe did was raise prices, 20%. Then she introduced Instagram dining nights. Then she replaced the old wooden tables with glossy white furniture. She changed the lighting. She removed the photographs of my grandparents. She painted over the little wall where customers had been signing their names for years. She even changed the menu typography. People complained. Quietly at first, then publicly. I saw the reviews. Food tastes different. Service feels rushed. Why did they change everything? Where is Hannah? That last question appeared over and over. I never responded. Then came the recipes. Chloe began modifying dishes. The short rib changed first. She made the sauce sweeter. Then she added a decorative foam. then edible flowers. The dish that had once taken me 3 weeks to perfect became something designed for photographs. One customer posted, "Beautiful plate, disappointing flavor." I saved the screenshot, not because I enjoyed it, because I knew exactly what was happening. The restaurant had been built around things nobody could see: systems, relationships, timing, knowledge, trust. My family had mistaken those things for replaceable labor. They weren't. They were infrastructure. You can repaint a building. You can't repaint 20 years of institutional knowledge. Then one evening, my former sous chef Marcus called me. I almost didn't answer. When I did, he sounded exhausted. "Hey. Hey, Marcus." There was silence. Then he said, "You know you're not supposed to contact us." "I know. I just wanted to tell you something." "What?" The walk-in broke again. I closed my eyes. "Did they call the refrigeration company?" "Yeah." "Okay." Another pause. Then Marcus said, "They don't know the emergency shutoff." I sighed. "It's behind the shelving." "I know." "No, the second panel." "Oh." He went quiet. "Anything else?" "No." Then he asked, "Are you coming back?" I looked around my apartment, at the empty counters, the unopened knife case on the floor. "No." His voice cracked slightly. "Okay." I knew what he was asking. He wasn't asking me to come back because he missed me. He was asking because he was scared, and I couldn't save him. That was the hardest thing. I couldn't rescue everyone from a decision they hadn't made. A week later, Marcus quit. Then 2 line cooks. Then our pastry chef. I heard about it from someone else. I wasn't celebrating. I was grieving. Because those people had worked beside me for years. They were losing their jobs because my family had decided a prettier face was more valuable than competence. Then Chloe called me at 8:47 on a Tuesday morning. I stared at the phone. I almost didn't answer. Finally, "Hello? Hannah? Chloe. Can we talk?" "We're talking." She exhaled. "I need help." I almost smiled. "I'm sure you do." "Hannah, please." I said nothing. "We're having problems." "What kind?" "Staffing." "That's not my problem." "I know." She paused. Then, "Dad says you still know the supplier contacts." I laughed. "You have the contracts." "Yes, but..." "And the recipes." "Yes." "And the kitchen manuals." "Yes." "So what's the problem?" She didn't answer. Then she said, "People listen to you." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it made me feel powerful. Because it made me sad. "You should have thought about that before you took my job." "I didn't take your job. You took the restaurant. Dad gave it to me. And you accepted." Silence. Then Chloe said something that surprised me. "I thought you'd stay." I closed my eyes. "You thought I'd stay?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because you're Hannah." I laughed bitterly. "What does that mean?" "You always fix things." I looked at the wall. For 20 years I had. That was exactly the problem. "You were counting on me to keep fixing things after you replaced me." "No." "Yes." "Hannah, I never wanted to hurt you." "You didn't have to want to." She started crying. I could hear it. For a second, the old instinct came back. Comfort her. Solve it. Help. Then I remembered Dad's words. "She photographs better than you." My voice became calm. "You wanted the restaurant?" "Yes." "Then run it." I hung up. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I regretted it. Because something had finally shifted. I wasn't responsible anymore. And that felt terrifying. It also felt like freedom. I started cooking again. Not professionally. Just for myself. I went to the farmer's market. Bought tomatoes. Peaches. Fresh herbs. Mushrooms. I came home and started experimenting. At first, I told myself it was therapy. Then I started writing things down. Recipes, costs, menus. I began imagining a different restaurant. Smaller. 24 seats. Open kitchen, no family members, no legacy, no expectations, just food. My food. I called the concept Ember, because everything I'd been through felt like standing inside a burned out building and realizing the heat hadn't disappeared. It had only moved. I found a vacant storefront 12 minutes from Miller's table. It was ugly, perfectly ugly. Old brick, concrete floors, cracked windows, a tiny kitchen space. I loved it immediately. The landlord asked what I planned to do. Restaurant. What kind? I thought for a moment. Something honest. He laughed. That's not very specific. I'll figure it out. I spent 3 weeks planning. No investors from my family, no money from Dad, no favors. I used my savings. I sold a car. I took a small business loan. I bought equipment secondhand. I did everything myself. And for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't building something to impress my father. I was building something that belonged to me. Then, one Friday afternoon, I received an email. It was from the owner of our biggest produce supplier. He wanted to meet. I went. He shook my hand. Hannah, I've been waiting to see what you'd do. I smiled. What do you mean? He leaned back. Your family hasn't been ordering properly. I said nothing. They've been missing deliveries. That's unfortunate. He studied me. Are you opening somewhere? Yes. He smiled. Good. I looked at him. Why? Because I'm tired of sending good ingredients to a kitchen that doesn't know what to do with them. I nearly laughed. Instead, I signed the supplier agreement. Then another supplier called. Then another. Former employees began reaching out. Marcus was first. I heard you're opening. Yes. Need a sous chef? I smiled. I might. Within 2 weeks, 4 former Miller's Table employees had joined me. Nobody was poached. Nobody was pressured. They came because they wanted to. That distinction mattered. I didn't steal anyone. I gave them somewhere to go. Meanwhile, Miller's Table was getting worse. The reviews became brutal. Then came the missed payroll. Then the canceled reservations. Then the local newspaper published an article about the restaurant's decline. The headline read, "What happened to Miller's Table?" I didn't click it. Marcus did. He sent me a screenshot. The article mentioned my departure. It described me as the longtime culinary force behind the restaurant. Then it quoted Chloe. We're evolving. I stared at that sentence. Evolving. I wondered how many times people could use that word to disguise collapse. 2 weeks later, Ember opened. I had exactly 24 seats. No grand opening, no celebrities, no influencers, no family, just 24 people. The first night, I stood behind the kitchen counter and looked at the room. My hands were shaking. Marcus noticed. Nervous? Terrified. He smiled. Good. Good? Means you care. The bell rang. First order. My heart pounded. Table 3. I nodded. Let's go. And then I cooked. For the first time in my life, I cooked without my father's shadow, without Chloe's smile hanging over me, without anyone telling me how I should look while doing it. I cooked, and people ate. Then they smiled. Then they came back. Within 3 weeks, Ember had a waiting list. Within 6 weeks, we were booked every night. A local critic came. Then another. The first review gave us 4.5 stars. The second gave us 5. One sentence from the second review made me put down my phone. Ember doesn't feel like a restaurant trying to prove anything. It feels like a chef finally allowed to tell the truth. I sat there for a long time. Then I cried. Not because of the review. Because nobody had ever described me that way before. Finally aloud. Then one afternoon, Dad walked into Ember. I was in the kitchen. I saw him through the pass. He looked older, smaller. He stood there staring at the room, at the customers, at the open kitchen, at the staff. Then his eyes found mine. I froze. He walked toward me. Hannah, I wiped my hands. Dad. He looked around. This is yours? Yes. He swallowed. You built all this? Yes. He nodded slowly. Then he said, we need to talk. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel like his daughter. I felt like the owner of my own life. About what? He hesitated. Miller's table. And that's when I knew. The restaurant wasn't asking for me back because they finally understood my worth. They were asking because they had discovered what the restaurant was worth without me. Nothing. Dad wanted me to come back. Not officially. Not publicly. He wanted a meeting. Private. No Chloe. No Mom. Just us. I agreed. Not because I wanted to return. Because I wanted to hear him say it. We met at a coffee shop. Dad looked exhausted. He hadn't shaved properly. His hands shook. Hannah, he said, things have gotten complicated. I almost smiled. Complicated. We're struggling. I know. We've lost staff. I know. Customers are complaining. I know. The bank is concerned. I looked at him. The bank? He nodded. We're behind. I sat back. And what exactly do you want from me? He looked down. Help. There it was. One word. The same word Chloe had used. Help. I asked. What kind? Come back. I shook my head. As what? Executive chef. I laughed. Dad frowned. What? You're offering me my old job. I'd give you more authority. Would I own anything? He didn't answer. Would my name be on the business? Silence. Would Chloe still be managing it? He sighed. Hannah. No. Answer me. He looked away. Yes. I nodded. Then no? Hannah, this isn't about pride. No. It isn't. It's about ownership. He looked at me. You're really going to let your family's restaurant die? I felt something cold move through me. There it was. The guilt. The oldest weapon in our family. Family. I leaned forward. Dad, you chose this. We all made mistakes. No. I shook my head. You made a decision. He stared at me. You told me Chloe was more photogenic. His face fell. I shouldn't have said that. No. You know what I meant. Yes. You were always better in the kitchen. I looked at him. That was never the question. He didn't understand. Maybe he never would. So I explained. You didn't choose the better chef. He nodded. You chose the better image. His eyes dropped. And now you're asking the chef to save the image. He had nothing to say. I stood. I'm sorry. Please. I stopped. Dad's voice cracked. I can't lose this place. I looked at him. For one brief second, I saw my father. The man who had taught me how to hold a knife. The man who had once stayed awake with me until midnight because I couldn't get a sauce right. The man who had told me, when I was 19, that my short rib was the dish. I loved that man. But I couldn't save him from a choice he had made. You already lost it, I said quietly. Then I walked out. I didn't look back. After that meeting, I made one decision. I would never compete with Miller's Table directly. I wouldn't run advertisements attacking them. I wouldn't mention them on social media. I wouldn't tell customers what happened. I didn't need to. The truth was happening without me. Miller's Table had become a shell. They were trying to copy Ember. New dishes, new plating, new staff. But you can't imitate intuition. You can copy a recipe. You can't copy the 20 years that created it. Then Chloe did something desperate. She posted a video. She accused me of betrayal. Not directly, but enough. She said, some people leave their families behind the moment they find success. The comments exploded. People knew. They asked questions. What happened to Hannah? Why isn't she at Miller's Table? Is Ember hers? Chloe deleted the video. Too late. Screenshots spread. I refused to respond. That silence became my answer. A month later, the bank called. Not me, my father. Miller's Table had defaulted on several payments. The restaurant was entering bankruptcy proceedings. 2 months after I walked out, the place was finished. The final night, Dad called me. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "Hannah, please call me." I listened once, then deleted it. The next morning, I drove past Miller's Table. The sign was still there, but the windows were dark. A piece of paper was taped to the door. Closed. I pulled over. I sat in my car. I thought I would feel victorious. I didn't. I felt empty. Because revenge is rarely the moment people imagine. There was no music, no cheering, no champagne. Just an empty building where I had spent half my life. I walked across the street, stood outside, and looked through the glass. The dining room was stripped. No flowers, no candles, no customers, no laughter. Just empty tables. I remembered being 15, my first shift. Dad standing beside me. "Keep your fingers curled." I smiled. "Like this?" "Exactly." I remembered my first burn, my first broken plate, my first successful service, my first menu, my first review, my first paycheck, my first argument with Dad, my first night staying until 3 a.m. 20 years, all inside those walls. And suddenly I realized something. They had not stolen my life. They had given me the reason to finally take it back. I walked away. I went to Ember. That night, the restaurant was full. 24 seats. Everyone occupied. The room was warm. The kitchen was loud. Marcus shouted orders. The servers laughed. Someone dropped a spoon. A customer applauded when dessert arrived. I stood in the middle of it all. And I realized this was home. Not Miller's Table. This. Something I had chosen. Something I owned. Something no one could hand to Chloe. A few weeks later, Dad came to Ember again. This time, he didn't ask for help. He just sat at the bar. I walked over. "You eating?" He nodded. "Please." I gave him a menu. He stared at it. Then he said, "You're really good." I smiled sadly. "I know." He looked surprised. I had never said that before. Then he ordered the short rib. My short rib. I cooked it myself. When I placed the plate in front of him, he stared at it for several seconds. Then he took a bite. His eyes closed. He didn't speak. I waited. Finally, he said, "This is the dish." I almost laughed. "You said that 20 years ago." He looked at me. "I meant it then." "Then why didn't you trust me?" He looked down. "I thought Chloe could take it further." "Did she?" "No." The word was barely audible. I sat across from him. He looked tired. "I was wrong," he said. Those 3 words should have healed something. They didn't. But they mattered. "I know," I said. Dad nodded. Then he asked, "Do you hate me?" I thought about it. "No." He looked surprised. "I hate what you did." He swallowed. "But I don't hate you." He nodded. We sat in silence. For the first time in years, there was nothing left to prove. He finished his meal, paid the bill, and before he left, he stood near the door. "Hannah?" "Yes?" "I'm proud of you." I looked at him. "Thank you." He left. I watched the door close. Then I turned around. Marcus was standing behind me. He smiled. "Boss?" I looked at him. "Yeah?" "Table 6 needs more bread." I laughed. "Then give them more bread." He grinned. "Yes, chef." And just like that, life continued. 6 months after Miller's Table closed, Ember was featured in a national food magazine. The article called me the chef who walked away from a family legacy and built something better. I didn't like that description. Because Ember wasn't better because Miller's Table failed. It was better because Ember was mine. We expanded carefully, not too fast. I refused investors who wanted control. I turned down television opportunities that wanted me to manufacture drama. I didn't want to become famous. I wanted to cook. That was the irony. My family had thought the person who photographed better would be better for the restaurant. But restaurants aren't photographs. They're living things. They require someone to notice, someone to care, someone to understand when the sauce is wrong before the customer says anything, someone who knows when a cook is exhausted, someone who knows when a supplier is cutting corners, someone who knows the difference between an expensive ingredient and a good one. My family had mistaken visibility for value. They weren't the first people to make that mistake. They won't be the last. But I learned something else. Being underestimated can hurt. For a long time, I thought the answer was proving people wrong. It isn't. The real victory is reaching a point where you no longer care whether they were wrong. That's what happened to me. 1 year after I left Miller's table, I received an envelope from my father. Inside was a photograph. It was old. I was 15, standing in the original Miller's table kitchen. My hair was tied back. My apron was too large. I was holding a knife. Dad stood beside me. We were both smiling. On the back, he had written, "You were always the heart of this place." I stared at it for a long time. Then I put it in a drawer. Not because I hated it, because I didn't need it anymore. I knew who I was. I wasn't the invisible chef. I wasn't the disappointing daughter. I wasn't the sister who photographed badly. I wasn't the employee who could be replaced. I was Hannah Miller, chef, owner, and the woman who finally stopped asking permission to take up space. People sometimes ask me whether I regret leaving. I always give the same answer. No, I regret staying as long as I did. I regret every night I went home exhausted while someone else received the applause. I regret every time I accepted family as an excuse for disrespect. I regret believing that loyalty meant allowing people to undervalue me. But leaving? Never. Because walking out of Miller's table wasn't revenge. It was the first honest thing I had done for myself in 20 years. The collapse afterward wasn't something I caused. It was simply what happened when the person holding everything together stopped holding it. That's an important distinction. I didn't burn the restaurant down. I didn't poison relationships. I didn't sabotage the books. I didn't steal customers. I didn't leak secrets. I didn't destroy my sister. I just stopped rescuing people who had chosen not to value me. And sometimes, that's the most powerful revenge there is. Not destruction. Absence. Letting people finally experience what your presence had been preventing. Today, Ember still has 24 seats. I kept it that way. People ask why I don't expand, why I don't open 5 locations, why I don't franchise, why I don't turn it into something enormous. I tell them, because I like knowing every table. I like knowing the customer who always orders extra bread. I like knowing the couple who comes every anniversary. I like watching Marcus argue with the pastry chef about music. I like standing at the pass before a service and listening to the kitchen wake up. I like the smell of butter hitting a hot pan. I like the sound of knives against cutting boards. I like the moment before the first ticket arrives, that tiny breath of silence, that moment when everyone is ready. Sometimes, just before service, I look around, at my staff, my kitchen, my menu, my name on the paperwork. And I remember that night at the family table. "You photograph better than her." For years, I thought that sentence had reduced me. Now I understand it differently. It revealed them, not me. They told me what they valued. And I believed them. Until I stopped. If there's one thing I would tell anyone listening who has ever been overlooked, dismissed, or treated like the invisible worker behind somebody else's success, it's this. Don't waste your life begging people to recognize your value. You can explain yourself forever. You can show them the numbers. You can list every sacrifice. You can remind them of every night you stayed late. You can put every achievement on the table. And sometimes they'll still choose the person who looks better in the photograph. Let them. Walk away. Build somewhere your work doesn't need an explanation. Because the most satisfying moment isn't watching the people who underestimated you fail. It's waking up one morning and realizing their opinion doesn't control your heartbeat anymore. That's what happened to me. My family thought they were choosing my sister over me. They were actually choosing my freedom. They thought they were removing me from the restaurant. They were removing me from a life where I had spent 20 years proving I belonged. And when I walked away, I didn't lose Miller's table. I found Ember. I found my voice. I found my confidence. And finally, I found myself. So if you ever find yourself standing in a room where everyone is applauding someone else for the work you did, remember this: you don't always have to fight for the microphone. Sometimes you just need to leave the stage, build your own, and let them discover, far too late, what they lost when you walked away. Because the day I left Miller's table, I took my knives. 2 months later, they lost their restaurant. But the real revenge wasn't watching their kitchen collapse. It was realizing that mine never needed them to survive. And for the first time in 20 years, when someone asked me who owned the restaurant, I didn't look at my father. I didn't look at my sister. I didn't look at anyone. I simply smiled and said, I do. If this story made you think about someone who underestimated you, leave a comment with the moment you think Hannah finally stopped being controlled by her family. And if you enjoy stories about betrayal, justice, and people reclaiming the lives others tried to take from them, subscribe for the next story. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't making someone regret hurting you. Sometimes it's becoming completely impossible for them to hurt you again.